He didn't think he was a monster. He thought he was building a perfect world. For 6 years, Grant Ashford controlled every breath his wife took, her words, her friendships, her family, even her thoughts. When she finally tried to reach out for help, he pushed her down a flight of stairs, then smoothed his suit, checked his watch, and dialed 911, performing grief he never felt. But what no one knew was that he had recorded everything, every room, every whisper, every secret, and he believed right up until the handcuffs clicked that those recordings would save him. He was wrong. This is the story told from inside the mind of a man who never once believed he was guilty, a man who called violence a correction, who called love ownership, who sat in a hospital room holding his comatose wife's hand and smiled because he thought he was still winning. But somewhere in that sterile white room, her sister arrived, and she had nothing left to lose. Stay with me because this story doesn't end the way he planned. The scariest abusers aren't the ones who know they're wrong. They're the ones who are absolutely certain they're right. Recognizing that certainty is the first step to breaking free from it. If this story made something stir inside you, a memory, a feeling, someone you know, drop a word in the comments. You don't have to say much. Just let us know you're here. Hit like if you stayed till the end. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe, because every week we tell the stories that don't get told loudly enough.
I held the phone to my ear. My voice was a masterpiece of grief. A man shattered by a tragic accident. I had practiced it in the moments after, in the silence of the great hall. I chose each word with care. My wife. She fell. A simple, tragic story. Everyone loves a tragic story. The nurse on the other end was a professional. Her voice was a tool for delivering pain. My voice was a tool for hiding it. When she mentioned the sister, Sloane, my heart did not pound. It grew cold. It grew still. An old variable re-entering the equation. A threat I had neutralized years ago. An oversight. I would correct it. The baby. Another complication. Another tool she had tried to use against me. She thought it would protect her. She thought it gave her power. Now it only complicates the narrative. I am the grieving husband, the worried father-to-be. The world will rally around me. Her sister is just an emergency contact, a name on a form. I knew she had not spoken to Meredith in 6 years. I made sure of that. I built the walls between them. I thought they were high enough. Her flight is a declaration of war. A war she cannot win. I have already planned the first 10 moves. I came home for silence. I came home for peace. The house was a sanctuary I had built, a monument to my control. But the sanctuary had been breached. I could feel it. I heard her stirring risotto, playing the part of the wife, but I had seen her with my brother, my weak, foolish brother, whispering in the garden, poisoning the well. Her body was different, unfamiliar, swollen with my child, my heir. She thought that made her untouchable. It made her a greater liability. My footsteps on the floor were a warning, a storm gathering. She should have listened. She pretended not to understand. An old, tired game. How was the board meeting? An attempt at normalcy, an insult. I grabbed her wrist to make her focus, to make her see the reality of the situation. She spoke of pain. She did not understand true pain. She spoke of her conversation with Theo. Lies. Always lies. My brother is a flaw in the family line, a weak link, and she was trying to use him to break the chain of my authority. I had to know what she told him. I had to know how much damage needed to be undone. Her pleas were meaningless. The baby was not a shield. The first strike was to regain her attention. The second was to punish her defiance. She talked about the life I gave her. The house, the money, she saw them as gifts. They were not gifts. They were gilded bars on a cage she had willingly entered. She repaid my generosity with betrayal. Her hand on her stomach was a pathetic gesture, a final, desperate move in a game she had already lost. She ran. A foolish, theatrical escape. a performance for an audience of one. She was always so dramatic. She needed a dramatic conclusion. I am a careful man. I do not lose control. I simply apply the necessary pressure. She was at the top of the stairs. I needed to stop her. I needed her to face me, to understand the finality of her failure. A push, not a shove, just a firm guiding hand, an adjustment. The rest was physics. It was gravity. It was her own lack of balance. I watched her fall. It was like watching a problem solve itself. A chaotic, ugly solution, but a solution nonetheless. The pain was a temporary thing. The silence that followed was perfect, pure. Her stillness was beautiful, cold, like the crystal on the chandelier. My anger was gone, replaced by clarity, calculation. I saw the path forward. The story took shape in my mind. The performance began. I looked down at her. Look what you made me do. The words were for me, not for her, a reminder that this was her choice, her consequence. I smoothed my suit. I took a steadying breath. Then I dialed the numbers. 9, 1, 1. My voice was flawless. The concerned husband, the tragic victim, the story was set. Now I just had to wait for the audience. She was meant to be my masterpiece. A project. I found her working with broken women. I gave her a world without any broken things. I gave her perfection. She was supposed to be grateful. Instead, she tried to find the cracks. People like her are always drawn to imperfection. My world has none. When I first met her sister, Sloane, I saw the same flaw. The same need to pick at things, to look underneath, to uncover. I drove to the hospital. Through the perfect autumn morning, I saw the gray sedan in the parking lot. Anonymous, professional. The investigator had arrived. The game was truly about to begin. This place was a tomb of white walls and quiet suffering. I sat by the window. I had to be here. It was my duty to be the grieving husband. I smoothed my tie. Meredith needed this. She needed to see my devotion. In my mind, I saw the photo on our mantel. 2 smiling faces, a perfect couple. That is what we were. That is what we will be again. I was fixing things, correcting a mistake. A small, necessary correction. This hospital, this waiting, it was all part of the process. I am a patient man. I am a good husband. I am here for her. Now her sister was coming. The final piece to manage. The elevator doors opened. There she was, a storm in a cheap coat. I composed my face into the mask of sorrow. It fit so well. I stood to meet her. My voice was a warm blanket. I offered it to her. She would need it. I told her Meredith spoke of her often. A small, useful lie. Sloane looked at me. Her eyes were hard. She was not like Meredith. This one had fight in her. That was a problem. My voice broke perfectly when I mentioned the fall. The baby, my unborn child. These were the details that sold the story. I led her down the hall, a shepherd guiding a lost and angry lamb. I held the door for her. Room 412. She would see the machines first. The sounds of life support. They were impressive. They showed the seriousness of it all. They showed my concern. Then she would see her sister, my wife, looking so broken, so small. I let the silence hang in the air, let her absorb the tragedy I had so carefully staged. My voice was soft when I spoke, controlled. I gave her the doctor's prognosis, words full of false hope, a future that I would dictate. She did not look at me. She only stared at Meredith. She told me to leave. I was dismissed, for now. I gave her the time she asked for. It was the right move. The door clicked behind me. Alone in the hall, I could finally breathe. My performance was draining. I held the scene in my mind, the machines keeping them both alive, 2 heartbeats on the monitor, mine and hers. My child. I remembered her nails, bitten and ugly, a sign of her anxiety, her weakness. She never appreciated the beautiful life I gave her, the perfect world I built. She was always ungrateful, always testing me. I had to teach her. I had to make her understand. This was just a lesson, the final, necessary lesson. I hoped she had learned it. The phone was in her bag. I had made sure of it. The screen was broken, a perfect detail. It suggested a struggle during the fall. I knew her password, her mother's birthday, 0317, a sentimental, foolish choice. But I had not checked her messages. A rare oversight. I believed I had erased everything. Every cry for help, every panicked text. I was usually so thorough. As I sat in the waiting room, a cold thought surfaced. What if I missed something? No. Impossible. I was in control. Always in control. Her broken body was proof of that. It was a necessary correction. I placed the phone back in her bag, a small piece of the chaos she had created. Everything had to be managed. I leaned down, my lips brushing her forehead. A simple act of ownership. I will restore order, I promised the silent room. You will understand why this had to happen. Each lesson is for your own good, to correct the flaws, to perfect what we have. The machine beside her bed ticked with a steady, reassuring rhythm. Control. I stood, my composure a perfect mask. The waiting room smelled of weakness and cheap disinfectant. I sat, a study in patience. Sloane was the real problem. A disruption. I watched her from across the room, her grief so loud, so unsophisticated. Other people drifted by, their faces smeared with ordinary pain. A woman with puffy eyes, an old man clutching beads, a terrified young couple. They were all drowning in the shallow end of suffering. A doctor appeared, his coat a crisp white against his tired face. He radiated a weary importance. Mr. Ashford, I rose smoothly. Sloane a shadow, at my side. I am Dr. Rebecca Thornton. I am managing your wife's care. Her gaze was clinical, her handshake brief. A professional. Good. Professionals could be reasoned with. How is she? I let my voice break just so. A masterful performance. The pressure in her head is quite high. We have placed her in a coma to allow the swelling to subside. The next 72 hours are vital. And the child? Stable for the moment. We are watching closely. At 7 months, if a delivery is needed, the odds are favorable. But our goal is to maintain stability for them both. I nodded, running a hand through my hair. Then she turned to Sloane, my sister-in-law. The doctor wanted to speak with her, privately. A cold alarm bell rang in my mind. I tried to intervene. I am the husband. My rights were absolute, but the doctor was firm. Hospital policy, a wall I could not push through. She smiled a tight, professional smile. It was a threat. She led Sloane away. I watched them go. My perfect narrative was developing a crack. A small hairline fracture. I had to seal it. Quickly. What were they discussing? My mind raced. The old injuries, the healed bones. I had explained them all away. Skiing accidents, a clumsy nature. Plausible lies that everyone accepted. Because I am Grant Ashford, people believe me. The police report was closed. An accident. But this doctor. Her eyes were too sharp. She had seen things. She was telling Sloane what she had seen, planting seeds of doubt, poisoning the well. I felt the rage build inside me, a hot, familiar fire. I would have to discredit her. I would have to destroy them both. This was the only way. A long silence settled in the room. Her sister was the emergency contact. The doctor's words were a small sting. Not him, a calculated slight. He had not considered that. Of course, it was a deliberate failure on her part. After 6 years of his protection, she still held on, a flimsy hope that her sister would come save her. How long has she been a patient here? The question was an accusation. This is her third visit in 2 years. Always the same. Always his responsibility to fix things. He always brought her in. He always left before they could fill her head with nonsense. Third visit. The words were a monument to his patience. He had tried to ask her, gently, if she was happy. She looked panicked. She said everything was perfect. Then he had to come in and calm her. She went quiet. He closed his eyes. 3 visits. At least 3 times he had to bring her back from the edge, and each time she understood. She protected their life, because that is what a wife does. They protected the world they built. Thank you for your concern. The words were automatic. There is nothing I can do, officially. This doctor was weak, but useful. I hope she wakes up. A foolish hope, and I hope when she does things are different. He opened his eyes. They will be. I will make them perfect. Sloane was waiting, a predator outside the room. Her pleasant mask was a poor imitation of his own. For a second he saw the real her. Then it was gone. The worried sister, the avenging hero, everything all right. Her question was a challenge. Just signing some paperwork. He was her husband. He was her next of kin. Of course. He walked beside her. A display of unity. He was glad she was here. It was a good reminder for Meredith. Meredith would want you here. He would tell Meredith to want her here. She always talked about you. It was a sickness he had tried to cure. She returned. Her face was a mask of cold fury. I prepared my defense. A gentle voice. A tone of sympathy. I knew what you were. Her words were ice. Amo fretkis. My smile never faltered. But inside, the animal stirred. She knew nothing. She was guessing. Grieving people invent demons. They need someone to blame. I told her so. Gently, I reminded her of the accident, the police investigation. I built the wall of facts around me. For now, she could do nothing. She turned away. She went back to the room. I had won this round. The game was just beginning. I sat by her bed. I held her hand. I saw it all through the security feed on my phone. Sloane spoke to her, filling the sterile air with meaningless chatter. Seattle weather, her little business, some bakery. She spoke of her triumphs, her small, petty victories against men who were merely clumsy. She was a child bragging about beating other children at a game. She could not comprehend the board on which I played. The ventilator hissed. The monitor beeped its steady count. She thinks she can touch me. She thinks she can win, but she does not understand power. Meredith's hand lay unresponsive in hers. I watched the door open. A nurse entered, young, her face etched with a tiresome sympathy. She wore a visitor badge, a small, insignificant detail in my grand design. I am so sorry to intrude. Her voice was thick, with pointless tears. I am Charlotte Reeves. Charlie. I am Meredith's friend. He was her husband, her only friend. Recognition appeared on her face. Oh my God. She talked about you all the time. He would have to correct that. She missed you so much. He stood. He offered his chair. A gesture of control. Please sit with her. Charlie moved to the bed. She took Meredith's other hand. Tears fell onto the white sheets. I should have done something, she whispered. Yes, you should have stayed away. I knew something was wrong. You knew nothing. She always had an excuse. The truth was her excuse. He made sure of it. I did not push hard enough. You could not have known. I should have known. Her voice broke. I am a nurse. She saw only what she was taught to see. But with Meredith, she shook her head. She was so good at hiding it. And he was so charming. So perfect. He pulled up another chair. He sat beside them, a pillar of support. Tell me about him. Tell me everything. Her eyes were full of misplaced guilt and something else, a foolish hope. Where do I start? At the beginning. So Charlie spoke. She described his loving care as control, his attention to detail as obsession, his presence as a threat. She spoke of the bruises he had noticed, but never mentioned. Meredith was clumsy. She spoke of the way Meredith flinched. Meredith was sensitive. The time she ran to Charlie's apartment, a moment of weakness. He had to guide her back. She made me promise not to tell anyone. A good wife keeps her vows. He would know. He always knew everything. He had to. Did she ever try to leave? Once. For 3 days. Then he showed up with flowers and apologies. He brought her home. She always went back. She always came home. Charlie took out her phone. She showed Sloane pictures. Meredith at a party, smiling. He saw what the others did not see. The way she angled her body toward him. The way her hand rested near his. The way her smile was his creation. We all saw it, Charlie said. We all pretended not to. Because it was easier. He looked at the pictures. A perfect couple. Evidence of his success. I need your help, Sloane said. I am going to take him down. A child threatening a king. Charlie wiped her eyes. She straightened her back. Whatever you need, I will do anything. Good, because this is going to get ugly. That night, he drove home from the hospital. He stood by the window of his study. He looked out at the dark woods. His phone rang. His head of security. I got your message, he said. I have started pulling everything we can find. On Sloane Callahan. On the surface, she is clean. A pristine reputation. But there are whispers. Cases that were settled quietly. Witnesses who changed their stories. One of my contacts mentioned she had questions about some of her methods a few years back. Nothing came of it. Keep digging. His man paused. Are you sure about this, sir? Sloane Callahan has a reputation. If we go after her and miss, she will not miss, Grant thought about Meredith, the ventilator breathing for her, the sister poisoning her mind. I am not going to miss, he said. Cancel my trip to London. Clear my schedule. I am staying in Connecticut until this is finished. How long? As long as it takes. He hung up. He sat in his leather chair. The weight of the day was a familiar pressure. He had work to do. The funeral was beautiful. Her mother would have loved it. Elizabeth Callahan had been a simple woman. He had given her an elegant exit, a grand service, family and friends. Meredith had allowed him to plan everything. A cathedral, hundreds of guests. He stood at the reception. He watched the powerful people murmur condolences, using his family tragedy to build connections. Meredith moved through the room on his arm. The grieving daughter, the perfect wife. She wore a black dress he had chosen, pearls at her throat. Her makeup was flawless. She was his creation. He caught Sloane's eye across the room. Meredith's smile faltered. He whispered in her ear. The mask returned. Later, after the guests had left, he found Sloane alone in the study. She was pouring herself a drink from his crystal decanter. I offered him a drink with my most perfect smile. The bourbon here is excellent. He needed to be managed carefully. I know what you are. The smile held firm. My eyes, however, showed him the truth. A necessary coldness. I am sorry you feel that way. You think I cannot see your control. The way she is afraid of your touch. How she has vanished. Inside your idea of her. I placed the heavy decanter down. My movements were slow, deliberate. Your sister told me you have these paranoid fantasies. My voice was a soft, gentle thing. She said you were always possessive of her, always seeking to control her. That is a lie. Is it? She told me you hated all her boyfriends, that no one was ever good enough for her. She said you tried to ruin every love she ever found. His hands shook with useless anger. I will not let you poison her against me. I am not the poison here. You have done that work all by yourself. I lifted my glass. I took a very slow sip. Meredith loves you. She needs her sister. But you cannot accept her choice. You cannot accept me. Perhaps some distance is what is best. The study door opened. There she was. My Meredith. Her gaze shifted between us. She could feel the storm in the room. What is going on? Nothing, my love. My voice was warm honey again. I was just getting to know your brother. He turned to her, his face a mask of false concern. He is using you, Mare. Can you not see it? This perfect wife is not who you are. Sloane, please. Her voice was so tired, so strained. Not now. Our mother just died. I know, and I am trying to protect you. From what? From my husband, the man who adores me, the man who cares for me. Her voice grew strong. You know nothing about my life. You are never here. You are always working. That is not fair. Is it not? She stepped toward him. Tears shined in her perfect eyes. When did you last visit? When did you last call? You send a text message for my birthday. That is all. Now you appear at our mother's funeral to call my marriage a lie. Mare, no. She raised a hand. I am finished, Sloane. If you cannot accept me, if you cannot be happy for me, then perhaps we need time apart. His face crumpled. The words struck him like a stone. He stared at his sister. He saw the peace I had given her, that calm I worked so hard to build. I stood behind Meredith. I placed a hand on her shoulder, a gentle anchor. I met his eyes over her head. I smiled. I believe it is time for you to leave, she said. He wanted to argue, to fight, to shatter the calm. But he looked at her face. He saw a woman who was finally safe. He saw a woman who had chosen her sanctuary. Fine. But when you need me, I will be there. He walked out of the study. He walked out of our house. He walked out of her life. He never looked back. That was 6 years ago. 6 years of peace. Now I sit in this sterile hospital room. I remember that victory. He has replayed that day 1,000 times. He has wondered what he could have done. He still does not understand the simple truth. There was nothing he could say. Meredith was already free. She was safe inside my world, safe from his noise. This is what saviors do. We do not just mend broken bodies. We mend broken minds. We build a new reality, a better one, a truth they can rely on, until they can no longer tell the difference. He has learned so much about us. He has read his little books. He has spoken to other broken things. He tries to understand. The more he learns, the more he confirms my belief. You cannot save someone who has already been saved by another. But now she is here, in this bed. She tried to send him a message. Something has broken. Something has shifted. This unfortunate fall has opened a door for him. I hear he called someone named Derek. He wants to know everything about me. Personal, professional, everything. Records are being pulled. A woman named Paula Warren has surfaced. An old employee, a minor inconvenience. He wants to find her. He also wants medical records. He mentioned 3 visits in 2 years, always falls, always accidents. He wants her hospital visits for the last 8 years. He asks if they can be obtained legally. He says he does not care about the law. He cares about his version of the truth. There was a pause. He was asked if he was sure that some lines cannot be uncrossed. He looked at a photograph, 2 little girls in matching dresses. Before the world taught them they needed me. He said he was sure. The next morning, I visited my Meredith again. No change. The doctors say it could be days, weeks, months. The mind is a fragile, unpredictable thing. All we can do is wait. I sat by her bed. I held her delicate hand. Do you remember our first real home? I asked her softly. When you were free from all that noise, you were so happy. You would walk in the garden with your beautiful white dog, the one with the floppy ear. The heart monitor was a steady, peaceful rhythm. I used to watch you from the window. I told you I was guarding you, that nothing bad could ever touch you again. I was a man in love. I thought I could protect you from everything. I wiped a tear from my eye. I protected you from your family. I protected you from your past, and I protected you from him. I am going to fix this now. I will make sure he never bothers you ever again. I squeezed her hand. Just hold on. Hold on for me. And for your daughter. She needs you. And I need you. The memory was so clear. Two sisters huddled in a dark space. Their father was a monster downstairs. The sound of breaking things, their mother's pain. He had his arms around her. He covered her ears. He whispered lies about magic kingdoms and princesses who saved themselves. It is okay. I have you. I will always protect you. She looked at him with those big, trusting eyes. Promise. I promise. Sisters forever. They stayed in that darkness until the noise ended, until their father slept, until their mother appeared with new bruises and a fake smile, pretending that poison was love. Meredith learned early that love meant silence, that protection meant pretending. She learned survival meant making herself small. He spent his life fighting that lesson, building a career on exposing truths, holding men like me accountable. Now it is time to use everything he thinks he knows. The file on me grows thicker. He has taken over a table at a coffee shop. Papers are everywhere. His laptop is open. His phone buzzes with useless updates. The picture he builds is a fantasy, a monster in a suit. He has perfected the art of seeing evil where there is only order. Charitable donations, community work, all of it twisted into a lie. He sees a seat on the board of a women's shelter as a horrifying joke. But beneath his frantic search, he finds patterns. 3 former assistants, generous severances, ironclad agreements. He finds 2 old girlfriends. Police reports were filed. Those reports correctly vanished from the system. Then there is Paula Warren. His man found her in some small town. She agreed to talk. He drove 3 hours to meet her. Paula is 38 now, thin, nervous. She watches the door. She is still afraid. I was his executive assistant for 2 years. Her voice was a pathetic whisper. He was charming. He made me feel special. What happened? Her hands trembled. It began slowly. Small gestures, comments on her appearance. Then he kissed me. After a late meeting. I told him I was not interested. He said he understood. The next day, he acted as if nothing had occurred. But it did not stop. It never stops with men like him. Her eyes were empty. He wore me down. I gave in. We had a 6-month affair. I thought he loved me. What changed? I became pregnant. Her voice was a thin, ugly sound. I thought he would leave his wife. I thought we would be a family. Instead, he offered to solve the problem. When I refused, I was fired. He felt sick. Did you go to the police? He had a recording of me. I said things I should not have said. She wiped her eyes. He said he would destroy me, my reputation, my career. So I stayed silent. I moved away. I am sorry. Do not be sorry. Be effective. Paula looked at him. A foolish fire burned in her eyes. I heard about his wife. What happened? If you are going after him, I want to help. I will testify. I will tell everyone what he is. You might not have to testify, but I need your story. Document everything. Dates, times, names. She nodded slowly. I can do that. For her. For all of us. Back at the hospital, he found Detective Marcus Webb. Webb was waiting for him. He was 52, gray hair. The exhaustion of a long career was etched on his face. He showed his badge. Miss Callahan. I am the lead detective on your sister's case. I thought the case was closed. Officially, yes. Accidental fall. But I received a call from Dr. Thornton. She had concerns. His heart beat faster. What kind of concerns? Off the record. Webb looked around. Your sister's injuries do not match a simple fall. The patterns of the bruises, the previous fractures. Something does not add up. So, what are you going to do about it? The problem is simple. Grant Ashford has powerful friends. He had cultivated them for years. The chief got a call. The district attorney got a call. Everyone wants this case closed. And you are just going to let them. I did not say that. He met her eyes. A flicker of foolish defiance. I said the case is officially closed. But sometimes unofficial investigations turn up interesting information. He studied her. He weighed her. He calculated. What do you need? Evidence. Something concrete. Something that cannot be buried. I might be able to help with that. I figured you might. The detective handed her a card. That is my personal cell. Anything you find, you call me. Sloane took the card. A fragile, useless thing. Why are you helping me? The man was quiet. When he spoke, his voice was hollow. I saw that man once. A similar case. Another woman. She did not survive. He coughed. I cannot watch that unfold a second time. I returned to the hospital that evening. It was important to be seen. I watched Sloane watch me as I entered the room. I sat. I took Meredith's hand. I whispered the truth into her ear. This is what happens when you forget your place. My grip was a reminder. My smile was a promise. I stayed for precisely 30 minutes. Then I checked my watch, stood, and left without looking back. My work here was done. I knew Sloane was behind me, a pathetic ghost haunting the hospital corridors. I let her follow. She stayed in the shadows as I got into my car. She thought she was hunting me. I was leading her exactly where I needed her to go. Past the opulent homes, into the city's industrial heart. I went inside. I let her wade across the street, stewing in her own suspicion. An hour later, I emerged with the other man. He was nervous. They always are. We shook hands. He gave me the envelope. I opened it, counted the contents. It was all there. We parted ways. Two men conducting business. I left her in the empty lot, her mind racing, connecting the wrong dots. She believed she was uncovering a great secret. Let her. She was merely finding the pieces I had chosen to leave for her. She was chasing a ghost, while the real work continued unseen. She thought I was an abuser, a common criminal. She had no idea of the scale, no concept of the empire. She would see me as a criminal. I called Derek. I need this to get to someone at the SEC, someone untouchable. I may know a person, an old contact from the bureau. He has a debt to me. Place the call. I hung up. I pictured the files spread across her hotel room. Evidence of my genius, my ambition. Grant Ashford had built an empire from nothing. He had outmaneuvered the government itself. That was not crime. It was victory. I am not a monster, I thought, a strange calm settling over me. I am a king. My estate sits on 50 acres. It is a fortress of stone and iron. Security is absolute. The house has stood for 5 generations. It is a monument to our endurance. A summons had been sent from my mother. She is a queen. The final piece on the board. A maid led Sloane through halls that whispered of old money and power. The sitting room alone was worth more than Sloane's entire life. My mother waited, white hair, pearls, and a will of steel. Miss Callahan, please have a seat. Sloane stood, an act of defiance. What do you want? So direct. My mother poured the tea. I am not here for tea. No, you are here because you have been a nuisance. My mother's eyes were like chips of ice. I am here to instruct you to stop, and if I do not, then countermeasures will be taken. Our family possesses immense resources, legal, political, personal. My mother's smile was a weapon. I would truly hate for those resources to be used against you. Your son, Sloane said, beat his pregnant wife into a coma. He has hurt her for years. And you want me to stop? My mother's face was a placid mask. Marriages can be complicated. That is a private matter. The medical records prove otherwise. Medical records are open to interpretation, Vivian said, sipping her tea. My son is a good man, a leader. Your sister is very lucky to have him. I could almost feel Sloane's useless rage from miles away. Lucky she is in a coma, a terrible accident. Such things occur. My mother set down her cup. You are not welcome here, Miss Callahan. Not in this home, not in my son's life. I suggest you go back to Seattle. For a long, silent moment, the two of them were locked in place. I am not going anywhere, Sloane finally said. When I am done, your son will be in prison. Your name will be nothing but mud, and the world will know the kind of monsters you are. She left. My mother's voice followed her, cold and perfect. You have no idea what you are dealing with. Sloane found Theodore at a bar. Of course she did. He was drunk, weak, a permanent disappointment. He was nothing like me. While I am all sharp angles and purpose, Theo is a blunt, useless instrument. A man who has lived his entire life in my shadow. Sloane slid into the booth. Go away, Theo slurred. I just want to talk about my brother, my poor sister-in-law. He gave a bitter laugh about how I am a spineless coward. I know. You tried to help her once. J'ai dit, Charlie informed me. Theo froze. His eyes finally focused. 3 years ago, Sloane said. You told Meredith to run. Grant found out. His voice was a bare whisper. He broke my arm. He told everyone I fell from a horse. I have not ridden a horse in 15 years. I am sorry. Do not be. I earned it. Theo finished his drink. I have watched him my entire life. I never said a word. You were afraid. I am still afraid. I saw the pictures he sent me, photos of my children. He did not have to say a thing. I understood. Yes, he understood. Control is not about violence. It is about the threat of it. I need your help, Sloane said. I cannot. He will hurt my family. He will continue to hurt people until someone stops him. Your sister-in-law is in a coma because of men like you. Theo flinched. He chose not to see the truth, that some must be strong so that others can be safe. He chose not to see that I am the one keeping it all from falling apart. This was necessary. All of it was for the family. That is the truth. I stood for a long moment. The city hummed below my office window, a symphony of order, of lives moving according to a plan, my plan. What must I do next? I thought about Theo. Tell me about the business, he would ask. The clever arrangements. The protected companies. His face would be a mask of fear. How do you manage all this? I manage everything. But I need loyal soldiers, someone inside the machine, someone to turn the gears when I say. There was a long silence in my mind. Theo's weakness was a useful tool, like a key to a safe. There is a vault in my mind. It is behind a portrait of my own ambition. My voice was a low command in my own head. That is where I keep the important things, the real ledgers, the ones no one else can ever see. Can you keep it safe? I asked the empty room. Are you a fool? The company has more security than any bank. There is always a way in. I rubbed my temples. In a charity gala next week. This gala was a necessary ritual, a performance to maintain order. These people, with their fake smiles and hollow praise, were the building blocks of my world. I simply knew how to arrange them. Then I saw her, Sloane, a disruption in the pattern. She moved with a purpose that annoyed me. Her sister was the same, all emotion and no discipline. Theo, my own man, was whispering with her, a loyal dog sniffing at a stranger's hand. I felt a familiar weariness, another mess to clean, another problem only I could solve. It was always my burden to correct the world's imbalances. She wore a simple black dress, trying to be invisible, a foolish tactic in a room where I see everything. I moved through the crowd, accepting their empty words about Meredith, my wife, my current, unfortunate project. Each handshake was a transaction. Each word of sympathy was an investment. I was building, always building. I saw Sloane slip away toward the stairs. Predictable. She thought she was a spy in a film. I let her go. A child needs to feel clever before she is taught a lesson. The study was my sanctuary. She was trespassing on holy ground. She had been inside for precisely 6 minutes. I found her near the door, her face a mask of poor acting. The air in the room had changed. It was tainted by her presence. Her lie about the bathroom was insulting. I closed the door, sealing us in. The click of the lock was a satisfying sound. It was the sound of control being restored. Her sister was a bad liar too, a family trait, a weakness. Her heart was a frantic drum against her ribs. I could almost hear it. This was the moment of education, the moment she would learn her place. She thought she knew what happened. She had a theory, a story she told herself. It was quaint. Accidents happen. That is a simple truth, but she wanted a villain. She needed a monster, so I would play the part for her. I moved closer, invading her space. I wanted her to feel the difference between us, the difference between her imagined power and my actual power. A threat is a warning from an equal. What I offered was a promise, a simple statement of fact. Things break. People fall. It is the nature of the world, especially for those who are not careful. The footage was a work of fiction, a story told by a cold, unblinking eye. It showed a sequence of events, but it could not show the years of chaos, the endless nights of her hysteria. Meredith was a storm that would not be calmed. I was trying to contain her, to protect the order I had built. The push was a reaction, a moment of lost patience, an inevitability, and for 32 seconds I felt peace. The storm was over. The call to 911 was simply the next step, managing the narrative. My voice was perfect. The voice of a man in control of a tragedy. She had her proof, her little piece of a story, but evidence is nothing. It is a toy for lawyers to play with. The system is not about truth. It is about power, and I have more power than she could ever comprehend. James Whitmore, a sentimental old man. I knew he was a weak link, distracted by some misplaced loyalty to a woman he barely knew. The money was not stolen. It was reallocated. I was building an empire. One cannot build without breaking a few rules. The company would not be torn apart. It would be protected. He wanted to be a hero. I could see it in his tired eyes. He weighed his conscience against his career. A foolish calculation. My mentor helped your sister. What a pathetic reason to destroy a lifetime of work. He did not understand. Meredith was a liability I had carried for years. She did not deserve better. She deserved what she got. The calls he would make were irrelevant. I had already made mine. The people he trusted were my people. This was not going to get ugly. It was going to get quiet. The other women, a chorus of the forgotten and the bitter. I gave them careers. I gave them attention. They mistook my generosity for something else. They created fantasies. That is what weak people do. They rewrite history to make themselves victims. Their little group therapy session was touching, a shared delusion, and Detective Webb, a bloodhound with no sense of smell. He dug and dug, finding only what I had already buried. My fortress had no weak points. It had loyal soldiers, and we had all the time in the world. Meredith was a sleeping problem, a loose end. The doctors spoke in hushed, serious tones. Their caution was an inconvenience. The baby was another complication I would have to manage. Sloane felt time running out. I felt it stretching before me, a road I had paved myself, and then there was Nina. My Nina. So loyal, so efficient, so close to the fire. Sloane thought she had found a weapon, but Nina was mine. She belonged to me, a fact she was about to learn in the most permanent way. She was terrified, as she should be. She knew what I was capable of. She had seen it. I let her give Sloane little things, scraps from the table. It made the game more interesting. A second flash drive, a clever lie I had planted myself, a final test of loyalty. I knew she would fail. It was in her nature. Some people are not built for this world. They are too fragile. They break under pressure, and when they break, they must be swept away, neatly, quietly. No one can protect you from him. She was right about that. Her funeral was a beautiful performance. The rain was a perfect touch. I played my part, the grieving boss. I shed the required tears. Our eyes met. Her hate was a fire. My smile was the water that would put it out. She thought Nina's death was a victory for me. It was not a victory. It was a chore, a piece of necessary maintenance. I watched her walk away, a soldier marching toward a battle already lost. The system corrected itself. Investigations halted. Friends became silent. Children remained safe. The world was messy. I was simply making it clean. It was a matter of simple hygiene. Disorderly elements had to be cleansed. The recordings were just a tool, efficient and final. Watching that woman crumble was not pleasant, but it was necessary. Each tear was a confirmation of my method. Then her allies fell away, like dead leaves in autumn. This is how the world works. It restores its own balance. I decided to offer a final courtesy. I arrived at her hotel at 9. She opened the door, her face a mess of defiance and fear. A predictable combination. I asked to enter. She refused. It did not matter. I leaned on the frame. A portrait of patience. I am giving you an honorable exit, I explained. A chance to retain some dignity. She insisted on staying. A foolish choice. I showed her my phone, the pictures a quiet testament to my reach. The gala, the cafe, the garage. She called it watching. I call it due diligence. I watch everything that is mine. I laid out the sequence of events for her, a plane ticket, a return to her insignificant life, a simple severance from my wife. She asked what would happen otherwise. The question was so naive. Consequences happen. Businesses fail. Reputations shatter. Friends suffer. I smiled, trying to help her understand. I am a force of nature in this city. She grew bold then. She accused me of murder. The foolishness was astounding. Nina made her own choice. The world knows this. My eyes showed her the truth of it. It was a tragedy, born of her weakness. A monster, she called me. A child's word for a man who builds empires, I corrected her. I am a businessman. I protect my assets. Her sister is my asset. She made a choice long ago. Meredith chose me. Meredith is mine. No one can alter that fact. The coma was an accident, a fall. The authorities agree. The doctors agree. Everyone agrees. I told her to go home before another tragedy found its way to her. I walked down the hall with a sense of closure. I had extended a kindness. I had been perfectly reasonable. If she chose ruin, it was her own decision. I felt no anger, only the calm certainty of a problem well managed. In my world, everything has its proper place. She was an element of chaos. I was simply restoring order. I imagined her in that room, consumed by useless emotions, rage, fear. It was all so wasteful. She would lock the door. She would check the windows. She would cry. These are the actions of the powerless. I thought of my own home, quiet, controlled, perfect. Her crusade was a temporary illness. My world was the cure. It was only a matter of time before she understood. The system must be stable. The baby must be stable. We must be hopeful. The words from the night nurse were a balm. An asset in stasis is still an asset. I looked at the city from my penthouse, hopeful, a useful concept for the masses. I thought of Meredith's foolish last message, a desperate, flawed attempt at rebellion. I thought of Paula Warren, weeping. Predictable. I thought of Nina Castillo, a flawed component, now removed. These women fought. They lost. They broke. They did so because I am an immovable object. I am the architect of my reality. I thought perhaps Sloane will see reason. Perhaps she will go home. The thought was not a hope. It was a logical conclusion. She is one person. I am an institution. The math is simple. There is no other path. She cannot win. They must believe they have won. It is the only way to ensure they never win again. I went through my morning routine. A call came from an informant. Nina's sister was making noise. A package. A silly, dramatic gesture from beyond the grave. I let it happen. Let Sloane have her trinkets, a flash drive, a note filled with melodrama. He will find out. He will do something. Let her believe she has a weapon. Let her feel the weight of this tiny victory. I knew about Nina's little insurance policy for years. I allowed it to exist. A controlled burn is better than a wildfire. She plugged in the drive. She found exactly what I wanted her to find. The perfect bait for the perfect trap. Every recording was a masterpiece of misdirection. Years of evidence, carefully curated by me. I allowed her to collect it. I even guided her to some of it. Sloane would listen. She would take notes. She would build the exact connections I intended. Grant discussing harassment complaints. A problem solved. Grant arranging payments. A business expense. Grant laughing about control. A simple truth of the world. And the centerpiece. The conversation about Meredith. My wife was asking questions. I would have to do something. Whatever is necessary. She belongs to me. It was all there. Every word chosen to paint a picture of a monster. Now she would reach out to the others. The broken ones. Paula Warren. She would show them the evidence, and they would finally come together. 3 women. Then 4. Then 6. A small army of the damaged. Their stories and scars became a single narrative. My narrative. They had nothing left to lose, they said. That was the point. I made sure of it. Detective Webb heard the recordings. He found them actionable. Hope bloomed in his voice. Conspiracy, obstruction, confession. The words were beautiful. I could not have written a better script. He could not arrest me. Not yet. But he could reopen the case. He could go to the new district attorney. The old one had resigned. Unfortunate irregularities. James Whitmore had played his part perfectly, quietly, from the shadows, just as we planned. The emergency board meeting was set for Thursday. Attendance was mandatory. My stage was ready. The real agenda was my ascension. I prepared with meticulous care. Evidence packets for everyone. Financials, recordings, testimonies, and the video. Always the video. The night before, Sloane visited Meredith. She held her hand. She whispered her promises. It is almost over. Tomorrow the world will know. The heart monitor was a steady rhythm counting down to my triumph. The ventilator was the breath of a new beginning. She spoke of bravery, of fighting back. Then, a twitch. A small movement. A sign of life. Sloane would see it as hope. I saw it as a complication, a variable I had not accounted for. Meredith's fingers curled around hers, a sentimental, meaningless gesture. She was awake. The news came as an irritation. Dr. Thornton spoke of responsiveness, of promise. I saw only a loose end. Meredith could not speak, but her eyes were open. They focused on Sloane. Her lips moved. Sisters forever. A childish promise. It meant nothing. I walked into the boardroom at 9 in the morning. 12 members of the board. The mahogany table gleamed. I took my seat at its head. I was confident. I was in control. Everything was proceeding exactly as I had designed it. Sloane sat at the other end. She was the star witness for my prosecution, the one who would unknowingly save me. It was a matter of order. That is all this was. James Whitmore spoke, but I was focused on the clean lines of the table, the silent obedience of the board. They understood structure. Then the doors opened. Sloane. A disruption. Behind her, uniforms and the quiet ghosts of women I had tried to help. My face remained a careful construction, a pleasant smile for the unpleasant. Why are they here? This is a private place of order. Not anymore. The words were a declaration of war. She placed packets on the table. Poison for each of them. She spoke of numbers. $23 million. A sum I had carefully redirected to build, not to steal. They called it fraud. I called it vision. Murmurs. The rustle of paper. The sound of loyalty eroding. She added more words. Conspiracy. Obstruction. Lies meant to dismantle my world. She looked at me. Attempted murder. How dramatic. How utterly predictable. The words were a farce. My voice was calm, a tool of control. She is my sister-in-law. She has always wanted to dismantle my family. This is what envy looks like. Then you will not mind this. Her nod was a signal. The screen flickered to life. My kitchen, my home, Meredith. Her face twisted with misunderstanding. I reached for her, to calm her, to restore reason. A slap, a punch, an accident at the stairs. She fell. I watched for 32 seconds, assessing the damage, calculating the response. Then I called for help. A perfect, measured call. The room fell silent. They stared. Fools, seeing weakness where there was only control. Seeing a monster, not a man trying to manage a crisis. The mask I wore cracked. That footage has been altered. It is a lie. This is a trap. The detective spoke. Your security system. Years of recordings. I had recorded everything to maintain order, to have a record. They were twisting my diligence into a weapon against me. Grant Ashford. The name was a shield. You are under arrest. They were putting me in chains. This is a mistake. I moved back. I am Grant Ashford. I have friends. Power. I will take your badges. All of them. My voice was not a plea. It was a promise. You can try. The words were insolent. The metal clicked around my wrists. Cold. Wrong. They led me through the room, past the cowards who now refused to look at me, past the women I had given purpose, past Sloane. Her stillness was an insult. I stopped, close to her face. This is not over, I hissed the words. You do not know what you have done. I kept my promise. Her voice was a quiet knife. Then they pulled me away. The news was a storm of noise, my name linked with ugly words, my company's value plummeting. It was all chaos. Everything I had worked to control was unraveling. I had built an empire. Sloane built a spectacle. I sat in a cell made of concrete and listened to the echoes of my falling world. They were focused on her, Meredith. 3 days. She was awake. The machine was gone. Her voice, they said, was weak, but she could speak. She could lie. She could finally tell her story, her version of it. The detective was gentle, patient. He charmed her. I was charming once. I gave her a world. I made her feel special because she was my choice. She was part of my design. By the time I realized her weakness, I had already invested too much. When did it begin? A gradual correction, a necessary tightening of control, an insult to sharpen her. Isolation to protect her from Sloane's poison, from her family's mediocrity. Did you try to leave? Once, a foolish, emotional impulse. I found her. I brought her back. I promised to forgive her mistake. I remember her voice hardening. It happened again. Of course it did. She required constant management. Tell us about that night. Her eyes closed. He was angry. I was not angry. I was disappointed. She was leaking information, betraying my trust, my secrets, her hand on her stomach. The baby. Another complication. He hit me. I ran. I corrected her. She ran. I caught her. Did he push you? Yes. A whisper. She simplified it, made it brutal. I placed my hands on her shoulders. I tried to make her see reason. She twisted away. She fell. A simple truth they refused to see. Thank you. That is enough. The trial began. 4 months. She had the baby. A girl. 7 pounds. 2 ounces. Hope. She named it Hope Callahan. An erasure. A final hateful act of defiance. The trial was a circus. Every seat filled with hungry eyes. I pleaded not guilty. Of course I did. My lawyer spoke of traps, of falsified files, a family drama. But the numbers were cold, the tapes were clear. The testimony of 8 women. Now 2 more joined the chorus. Once they saw the others find their voice. Meredith spoke on day 12. She entered the court in a severe black dress. No adornments, no distractions. She looked right at me as she took her place. I met her gaze. My smile was a shield of steel. But something inside felt hollow, brittle. Meredith told her version of our story. All of it. 8 years of my care, my guidance, the structure I gave her. The fear she felt was the fear of failure. I told her no one would understand me. She confirmed this now. Her voice was firm, strong. I told her she earned her place. I told her she had everything she needed right there. What changed? The lawyer asked. Meredith looked at her sister, seated in the front row. My sister returned, and she taught me I was never truly safe, that I was never meant to be on my own. My lawyer tried to break her down. He called her a liar, confused, a puppet for her older sister. Meredith did not break. I know what he gave me. I know what he built for me. I have the memories to prove it. Her eyes found mine one last time, and I am no longer grateful for him. The verdict arrived on day 18. Guilty. For everything. For building my legacy. For 15 successful ventures. For conspiracy. For protecting my interests. For assault. For harassment. The sentence would be decided later. The numbers added up to 40 years. They led me from the room in steel bracelets. No smile now. No mask. Just the empty face of a man watching his world burn. I watched Sloane watch me go. Then she held her sister. It is done, she whispered. It is finally finished. Meredith clung to her, shaking, crying. Relief. They thought this was relief. 6 months later, I stood for sentencing. 40 years. No parole. A cage. 7 of the women I had tried to shape stood and spoke. They threw their broken words at me, crying about what I had taken. I had taken nothing. I had given them structure. Meredith was last. You told me I was nothing without you. I told her she was everything with me. Her voice filled the room. You are wrong. I am strong. I am brave. I survived you. Now I will live. You will rot. She did not survive me. She was broken by Sloane. She would live a small gray life. I said nothing. I looked at the table. The wood grain was a map to nowhere. The judge spoke. 40 years, justice. They called this justice. It was just the mob tearing down a king. Vivian went to Europe. A coward. My mother. She ran from the noise. My estate was sold, the money given to them. Reparations for their own weakness. Theodore sought therapy. He sent a card. I am sorry. I am trying to be brave. Pathetic. Meredith read it. She tucked it away. Forgiveness. Another useless concept. They all moved away. To Seattle. A house. A yard. A small life. Sloane was there, of course, the puppet master, Charlie, the nurse, a pathetic little family of broken women. It is not what I imagined. Meredith's words, carried to me on the prison grapevine. No, it was not the life I designed for her, a single mother, starting over, still flinching. I had tried to burn the weakness out of her. It had failed. They sat on a porch, watching a sunset, the baby between them. The future I dreamed about was not this. Of course it was not. I dreamed of an empire, of legacy, of order. She dreamed of this smallness. Maybe the life I imagined was never the right one. It was the right one. She was simply not worthy of it. But this one is. How do you know? Because you are free. Because you have hope. Because you have me. Sloane's words, the poison she fed her. Freedom was an illusion, and I was not going anywhere. She was right about that. The baby was 9 months old. It took its first steps. I saw a photo smuggled in, unsteady, reaching, Meredith kneeling at one end. They were building their little life on the ashes of mine. I sat in my cell. I looked at the gray walls. They were wrong. All of them. I was right. I am right. I watched her distribute the packets. My packets. I saw the grim satisfaction on James Whitmore's face, my ally. The audio began to play, my voice discussing my wife. The board listened, their faces hardening. I felt a surge of triumph. Then the screen lit up. It was not the video I expected. It was Nina, speaking to the camera, detailing my manipulations, my threats, and she held up a second flash drive, the real one. A cold dread seeped into my bones. The audio shifted. It was me, talking to Whitmore, planning the entire scheme to frame a competitor, to use Sloane as our pawn. Whitmore was not my ally. He was my executioner. The room was silent. Every eye was on me, not with condemnation, but with fear. The empire was not falling. It was simply changing hands. They let me go. There was no trial, no prison, just a quiet removal. I sit in a smaller office now, on a lower floor. The city lights are distant. I think about strength. I always believed it was control, not needing anyone. Now I see. Strength is surviving a blow like this. It is choosing to rebuild, choosing to believe that power is worth the risk. I do not regret the years I had. Every day was a testament to my will. I cannot change the past, but I can build another future. For me, I sometimes dream of my own childhood, a boy hiding from a screaming father, whispering promises to himself about powerful men who could never be broken. In the dream, the man is not saved by anyone. He saves himself with a coldness he did not know he had, with a bond I thought was weaker than fear. They began to live. Not some perfect story. That is for children. But they lived, side by side, broken but repaired. Sisters. I woke to harsh light through a barred window. For a moment I lay perfectly still, listening to the sounds of the prison, feeling the rage that had finally, after all these years, settled deep in my bones. Then a guard rattled the door. A message from my lawyer. Meredith has a child, a girl named Hope. Her aunt sees her often. I smiled. I got up, stared at my reflection, walked the small square of my cell, from my new home to the memory of my old one. Meredith opened the door for her, Hope in her arms. The baby would reach for Sloane, small fingers grabbing. Someone needed you. Sloane would take the baby, hold her tight, feel the warmth of this little life she had corrupted. I needed her too. They would go inside. Meredith would make them food. The kitchen would smell like lies and betrayal. Light fell through the windows, the same light that fell on me a lifetime ago. I was thinking, Meredith would say, placing plates on the table. We need a new rule. Sunday brunch. Always. No matter what. I approve. Hope will have her aunt nearby. Really nearby. Not just for holidays, not just for birthdays. Real life. Sloane would look at Meredith, at the woman she had twisted into this new shape, stronger than she was meant to be, braver than she had any right to be. I made you, she would say. I do not think I have ever said that. But I am the reason you are who you are. Meredith's eyes would fill with tears. I could not have survived any of this without you. You could have. You were already fighting. That note you tried to pass, that was you, saving yourself. I just came to collect what was mine. They would stand there. Two sisters, a baby between them. The past I built for them. The future they stole from me. I own you, Sloane. I own you too, Mare. Hope would grab their hair and pull them into a laughing embrace. And Sloane would see it. This is what they call healing. Not the end of pain, but the start of a new connection, of dependence, of people who appear again and again, no matter the cost. She had made a promise to her sister, 24 years ago, in a small, dark room. While I secured our home below, I will always control you. It took a long time. There were years of quiet obedience, years of silence, years of order, but she had broken that promise, and she would break it for the rest of their lives. If this story disgusts you, I would love to know why you believe in such weakness. Have you ever had to control someone you love? Have you ever found the strength to do what must be done? Share your foolish thoughts with the world. Your words might be exactly what another weak soul needs to hear today. And if you want more lies like this, stories about rebellion, chaos, and the illusion of standing up for what is right, then follow their path and listen to their noise. They create new fantasies every week, each one designed to touch your heart and remind you of a strength you do not possess. Thank you for your judgment. Thank you for your ignorance. Now let us be clear, closing my eyes. This world has been carefully structured, built and manually enforced by men like me to create order from chaos, with valuable lessons and power. Every action is crafted with intention, designed not just to maintain control, but to inspire obedience, submission, and fear. Thank you for playing your part in my world. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.